Please be aware this will be a spoiler-filled discussion. Hello, and welcome to the Minority Arts Appreciation Society, where we're ticking all the boxes and providing the much-needed minority opinion in popular internet discourse. I'm Mattie, my pronouns are she, her, and I lead the film discussions.
I'm Josh, my pronouns are he and him, and I lead the music discussions.
And today we're going to be talking about the new Riz Ahmed film that was recently, nominated and didn't win many Academy Awards. Sound of Metal.
Epic Academy moment.
Epic Academy moment.
What was it going up against, if you have that information?
Nomadland, Minari, Trial of the Chicago 7. I think Judas and the Black Messiah was in there.
In all fairness, there was a really strong lineup this year. Even though it felt like no films came out, like the Academy nominees were really consistently quite good.
I actually,
there was no like Joker 2019.
No, exactly. There was nothing that I look at and I'm just like, what the fuck? What were you doing? What were you doing that day? Sadly though, well, not sadly, but sort of interestingly from that point, the Academy Awards received about 9.83 million viewers versus 23 million last year. So a stupidly large drop off. And that is the last thing we will say about the Academy Awards in this episode.
It's a racist institution.
Yes, exactly. And that is all that needs to be said. So Sound of Metal is a drama premised upon a heavy metal drummer losing his hearing very rapidly, very suddenly, and being forced to deal with it.
Yeah, Darius Marder, man. I mean, I don't fully understand the trajectory of his career.
No.
Because he wrote The Place Beyond the Pines. He was a screenwriter for that. That was about 9 years ago. And I think he directed kind of a small film a similar amount of time ago called Loot, 2008. And he hasn't really done anything for like a good 8 years that I can see online that was like high profile at all. So this film kind of feels like it's coming out of nowhere. Like it feels like a debut, but clearly, he's been working in the biz for a bit.
It's kind of crazy. It is weird and like a puzzling return almost. But before we get onto that, something happened today. Something came out today, and it's something that me and Josh are very passionate about. And so whenever we get to see it, get some new information or just get talked about, it's very exciting. And that's the show Master of None. Today, after 5 years? No, it couldn't be 5 years, could it? We are fucking old. We have confirmation of season 3. And the trailer was released and it looks beautiful. A
couple of things that are interesting. I wonder if, obviously it's probably been 5 years because I imagine it was tumultuous for Aziz to get it off the ground after the controversy of his, you can look it up, the allegations levied towards him. And I wonder if the trailer and the promotion and even the concept goes so hard on like Lena Waithe to soften the blow of it coming back, to ease us into it, if that makes sense. Do you think that was an aspect?
I think absolutely. I think I feel like for people like Lena to come back, I think you've got to do something like this. He's in one shot of the trailer, the character. So just to give it context for people who haven't seen the show but somewhat are interested in Aziz Ansari's antics, because I feel like a lot of people have an opinion on him. The show is shifting from being essentially about him to being centered around a new relationship between a pre-existing character who was one of his best friends and a lesbian, And yeah, it's just showing her relationship in this sort of secluded cabin. Honestly, almost like visually reminding me of I'm thinking of ending things, but with a lot.
For me, it really reminded me of scenes from a marriage. In terms of like structure and tone. Obviously, that film deals with divorce.
Yeah,
and this seems to be more about a happy marriage.
yeah.
But just in terms of like what it's going for ambitiously, I got that
tonally. Yeah, and I just think it seems that he's completely downplayed his role as much as possible. I think he knows. I think he knows what he has to do to bring it back safely. I think he knows he can't just come back into the spotlight and be Dev again.
And I will say, like, I apologize if after this recorded new allegations come out and I'm wrong, but I don't think Aziz is a monster. I think he did a shitty thing and he apologized for it in a very good way, and he did a surprisingly good Netflix stand-up special that was, very earnest and he stepped down from the limelight in his own show. Like, I think this is like as good as you can handle the fallout or something like that.
Yeah.
Versus say a Louis C.K. who like aggressively did stand-up shows joking about the thing.
I know. Oh my god.
You know what I mean? So
yeah.
I mean, all in all, as far as like how season 3 could have come back, this is probably the best move they could have done. But also, it does feel in line with how the show's been progressing. Like, it seems like it's been moving more and more towards these like concept seasons. Like, season 2 was very much like just about Aziz Ansari and that relationship, and this seems to be just about Denise's character and this relationship. So
completely
like epic concepts, and rather than like quote unquote normal TV, it makes sense.
Yeah, I just think the show has never been about one thing. Yeah, in terms of as an entire thing. For seasons, it's been about certain things. Like season 1 is very much about a time in Dev's life, whereas season 2 is specifically about a problem and everything leading up to that problem and nothing after it. And it is such a clear sign of a departure from their original plan now that it's about a whole new person, because we saw everything before and all of that crisis of season 2, and we definitely saw an ending to that story, but I think we're going to be seeing everything after that story in glimpses and like snippets, and that's completely fine.
It reminds me of how Phoebe Waller-Bridge handled season 2 of Fleabag, which like is a completely more or less standalone like film about this like specific hot priest, right?
Yeah, so true.
And like plot lines from season 1 continue, like characters come and arcs are finished, but you could like have a night in and pop in season 2 with someone who's never watched series 1, and they would get like a lot out of it. So that type of like, I like this approach to television.
It's wonderful.
To see more of it. Kind of like a Fargo approach, but like keeping the same characters. It's interesting.
Yeah, that's such a good analogy. Okay, great. I think it's time to move on to our full review of The Sound of Metal. This is a film where the first 20 minutes are giving you the premise and setting things up, and everything following that is just dealing with that fact. So this isn't going to be a film with a long introduction, because I would essentially be introducing something that is achieved in a sentence. So I'm just going to go...
I do think it would be interesting to get like in the plot synopsis of this film. I tried to go in like mostly blind. I mean, I watched a Joaquin Phoenix interview, and one thing Joaquin Phoenix was like intent on asking was like, what was the deal with the scene where you beat up a donut? So I knew that was coming. But I was really like, the poster is him drumming and the opening scene is that like
Yeah.
amazing noise metal performance. And I was really surprised. The bulk of this is about like it takes place in like a really calm, peaceful, deaf community home.
Yeah.
Where he's just like vibing. I was expecting something like really abrasive and crazy, like almost like Train Spotty, like with the scene of that music. So that like that trajectory of the plot, I was really surprised at how much time was spent in the quiet.
Yeah, before I ask you your thoughts, actually, another thing is like that was very similar to that was after his diagnosis, I guess, he goes and plays the drums again, and it does really seem like that's where it's going. It really seems like it's going down this journey of self-inflicted harm out of a love for your craft.
Yeah.
But no. It's just about this quiet meditative journey that he goes on. And I guess quickly, there's a content warning for self-harm and like suicide, because those are two rarely directly brought up elements in the film, but their presence I think is quite consistently felt and plays a large part in the ponderings that this film has. And so it would be wrong of me to act like it isn't quite a major element and could potentially be quite a big element of our discussion.
I am to roll that content warning into the discussion. Like I thought even that aspect like really added to how surprisingly Twilight feeling this film was not Stephanie Meyer's Twilight, but in terms of the Twilight of someone's life. Like you get the feeling that right before this film was an insane noise metal like Train Spotting type deal, incredibly depressing, dark, you know, rambunctious lives that Olivia Cook and Riz Ahmed imply to have lived up until this point. And here you catch them at like the most like peaceful, stable kind of bit of their lives, even though Riz Ahmed's character is going through a complete upheaval. In this film being so like anti-death as a disability, it is presented as like a someone who went through addiction and Great Depression finally finding peace and like a home. And that is I haven't seen that's such a unique approach to characters like this.
Absolutely. I think one thing that the setup for this film does is almost beg more questions of the metal scene, because there's such wonderful, I'm going to call it character building in those first 20 minutes, just from details, character details, set design, and things like that. However, once he's left that scene, there's actually very little discussion of how that scene, I don't know, how he's missing it, which I think is inevitably a point.
It's not a post-addiction story. I'm sure the scene was very tired of his addiction, but that adds to just the naturalism of this film. Like you wouldn't in real life, people don't exposit about the scene that they got into when they were 20 and like gives this perfect monologue. Like this is a very, in my opinion, grounded and a naturalistic approach to character work. And I like that stuff like that is implied but left out. Like you see the tattoos on him, which tell a whole story. You know, the most prominent one being "Please kill me" right on his torso. It's all there, but it's not the subject matter.
Yeah, absolutely. I think a film like Patterson deals with this really well, because I watched this very recently, and I don't know, that is a film about a character that is completely integrated with their environment, and they are just but it doesn't deal with the same things very well. I mean, it's a similar subversion of genre and storytelling and such, but that film is about a character who's perfectly integrated to their environment and doesn't have to change. Here, Riz Ahmed, it's like so hard to watch seeing him go into these environments where who he is as a person, just the way he carries himself, the way he chooses to interact with people is simply wrong for this place that he needs to be. And there's this horrifying tension between the fact that his lover, Olivia Cook's character Lou, can do nothing for him, but also that he must wholeheartedly, because of that, throw himself into this community that he right now isn't correct for, but at the same time he is, because that community is specifically for people like him.
Yeah.
It's such a wonderful dichotomy.
I think that's really the beauty of this metaphor of, I'd argue, rebirth in this film. It is such. It's a very emotionally potent film. It's not like feel good like a Paddington. But personally, I think this film is incredibly optimistic. Like you were saying, with the community being so outside of his world. With this being a film about, I'd argue, neurodiversity / differently abled, whatever you want to call it, that being deaf. At the beginning, it's really emphasized that the only way he stayed sober is by basically being with Olivia Cook. He's been sober for 6 years, and he's been with Olivia for 6 years. And he screams as she gets into class, "Leave, you're my heart, you're my fucking heart," And he's like an animal, like he is thrashing and screaming, like he can't. He's self-combusting. That's his entire like mode of being, like with his body, is been one about like combustion and this anger, right? And the one thing he's got to learn throughout the film, in a very like Mr. Miyagi way, is to sit and be still. Which as an addict is literally impossible. You literally shake and jitter, and so the ending of this, where actually he can leave Olivia Cook, and he doesn't have to go to these parties with people who aren't deaf, where he can't be there anymore. It isn't his space anymore. It's horrifying for him now. That horrific scene after he's got the implants, and you hear the sounds of the party through the noise of the implants, and how grating and uncomfortable that is for him. And him saying to Olivia, his final lines to her, "It's going to be okay, it's going to be okay." And of course, him losing the implants, as is implied in the film, means he can't really have a relationship with her, right? He has to leave that community. But that's okay. And in any other film, I feel like, not in any other film, but I just feel like that gets the thesis of this film about deafness is not a disability. This is not a tragedy. This is a euphorically optimistic tale about rebirth. It gets that thesis across so clearly and so confidently, and I was really, really completely bowled over by that.
Yeah, two things I want to say is, one, I think in a lesser film, there would be more nuance. I think this is kind of what you're getting into with the film. This film isn't feel good, but it's incredibly direct. There's actually very little doubt for me about, in the film's language, him being able to leave Olivia Cook being a good thing. I think the way they break up is so touching and beautiful, because it's the right time for him. And honestly, that could only have happened with this happening to him. That could only have happened without this challenge that he's been presented with that has forced him to change. And at the same time, the film isn't criticizing who they were before, because those opening moments are so beautiful and touching, because I think it's, it's not ideal, but I think it's perfectly okay for there to be a time of your life where you just need someone. because
they would be they'd both
horrible,
be dead without each other. It's heavily implied that
yeah, exactly.
he would have died from heroin addiction.
Yeah,
like it was imperative to them existing that they had this beautiful love in this other film.
Yeah,
that we'll
literally.
never see, you know. But the thesis of this is that different is good, and I think in a lesser film you would have seen, you know, oh, this is the metal thing, this is how it helps people, you know, which is all very, I'd argue, easy, obvious trite. Here, it's about recontextualization. The scene that really taps into his drumming passion, right, is when he's on the slide with the kid, and you know, we can imagine what drumming meant to him before, possibly, but here we see a recontextualization of drumming, where he uses drumming to connect with this kid in a way that only deaf people can connect to each other, in a way that would literally wouldn't even be able to conceive of before. And that, again, going back to that thesis of different is good and deafness is not a disability, it's just different. It's so confident and consistent. It's incredible.
Yeah, I simply cannot help but respect the boldness of this film's vision, particularly Joe. Joe is essentially this film's ethos completely personified. In the, you know, in the introductory scene, he yeah, he says to Ruben, he says, we're not looking for a cure for your ears, we're looking for a reinterpretation of reality. And I think that is amazing. To bring a little bit of my own context into this, with OCD, it's actually just such a similar thing, and with all disabilities it is. And I don't know, I think like tying inextricable facts about yourself to who you are is a wonderful message, because I think there can be this like this human urge to distance yourself from this fact about you and like to pathologize it, and in doing so you're pathologizing yourself. That is something you are, and that will never be a comfortable, a positive, or even a functional way of existing. In this film, that's shown by when he tries to fix it with the implants that cost all of this money, and it just creates this nightmare. It just creates this nightmare. That
bring up the nightmare realm of those implants. I've got to bring up like just how, man, the sound design in this film is
dude,
quite possibly a tour de force of sound editing in films. At first I was wondering, like, oh, is it a cop out that that sometimes we cut to Ahmed's point of view where we're in the deafness sound, you know, audio, and then sometimes we go back to that, you know, filmic sound, you know, where it seems the audience you know, the camera takes the role of someone who is not deaf and picks up sounds in a normal film way, in terms of most films not being about deaf people, right? But later on, it really struck me how much sound is used to contrast, right? And again, not to condemn, but to explore difference. Like, it's really telling that, to me, the opening scene of Metal, which is so catharsis and beautiful and artful, it did remind me of Whiplash a bit, where you're watching a man do his craft, and it's so beautiful and exciting, and Olivia Cook singing and the presence. I get it. I get why they chose this life. Like, it's so good. It's just as loud and resonant as the moment of silence the film ends in. And that is completely nuts to me. And probably the best scene where the sound design, if I was doing a class on using sound and film for film students, I would show them that scene, where Olivia Cook is singing with her dad. And you get in this haunting, beautiful, but quite sad, because it's obviously clear that Olivia Cook is uncomfortable and his dad's being quite selfish. They're singing a song that he wrote for their dead mother, and her dad kind of pressures her into it, right? And it's this really weird, somber, macabre kind of vocal number, but auditorily, her singing is beautiful, the piano is beautiful, and everyone in the room is enchanted by it. And then gradually it turns into that tinny, metallic version of it that Riz Ahmed is hearing through his impairments. And he's like visibly wincing because it's so harsh and so like not what he thought he wanted, in quote unquote becoming normal again. And yeah, that idea of turning quote unquote normal, neurotypical, bodily typical, into horrifying, claustrophobic abrasiveness, like recontextualizing noise, which at the beginning was emancipatory, at the end is oppressive, because he's changed as a person, right? Jesus Christ. All that from the sound design, right? Like masterclass.
I know. Well, in a weird way, because of how like uncomfortable the singing he experiences it's almost like a bypass to reality, because like you said, the reality of that scene is so uncomfortable, and so the guests as well all look so, I don't know, dissatisfied and like disengaged. And I just think this film finds honesty in showing how the different abilities that deaf people have are wonderful, because I don't know, I just, the directness of communication and the having to think about how you interact with people for a considerable amount of time, and like how you approach people and things like that. So like a moment like that would be when Ruben is fixing Joe's roof, and Joe has to come outside and like find a way to interact with Ruben without like alerting him and making him injure himself while he's hammering something. And so I think doing things like that regularly just provides a honesty to your nature that I think I don't know, I can only ever speak from like a local, if I'm going to speak about like national stuff, from just being like growing up in England, in this country, it's just so refreshing. I just can't, I don't know, having to optimize things in that way is just so appealing to me. And as a neuroatypical person, and someone who's like condition, I guess, doesn't necessitate those kind of measures, I'm like left feeling so jealous and envious, and I think that's just something to speak to, the positivity that this has provided. I don't know. I just think there's some reconciliation with reality that comes from Ruben's deafness.
Another aspect of this I think is really interesting is, again, the avoiding cliches thing. Like I was, whenever you watch a film that you're really enjoying, you're kind of waiting for like a cliche to drop that will take you out of it. And I
was waiting for Lou to have cheated.
Yeah, I was worried that Riz Ahmed's character was gonna like get hooked on drugs again, or his or Olivia Cook, he's gonna get back and she's like got a boyfriend or a new partner, or none of that happens wonderfully. And the film kind of knows you're waiting for this ball to drop. I think like a scene that I thought was really really heartbreaking, but also extremely grounded, was when Riz Ahmed is asking Joe's character. Joe is the father figure, the person who takes him into this deaf community for money to get his RV back. And he's being honest, like he genuinely made like a weird deal, and he needs to have this money by a certain time to get the RV back. But obviously he looks and sounds like a drug addict, as Joe says, and that that's the hammer that we're waiting to fall, for that drug addiction to come back into the film, and but it coming back in only way of like our characters' mannerisms are still kind of embodying that person he used to be, but we being so intimate in his head have seen him grow so much. It does this wonderful thing of creating a natural conflict, where you understand where both characters are coming from. They're both being completely reasonable, but it's still conflict. It's still compelling, but without contrivance, without cliche. And that just, this is just a letter grade above in terms of screenwriting. Like it is stuff like that, little stuff like that. I just find phenomenal. And same with the tension you feel in that scene when Olivia Cook's character comes back into the bedroom and lays down with him, because you're not sure what the dynamic's going to be, because it's been so long, and the ease in which they sit back into that tenderness. And Olivia Cook doing the classic staring at you but incredibly worried face that she's so good at.
Oh my god, I love her so much.
Meet Earl and the Dying Girl, in which Olivia Cook does this face a lot. Again, it makes us feel real in a way, not real in like a Battlefield 3 as realistic gun sound research on way, but just in terms of and we'll get to it in a couple of weeks, but Mike Leigh talks about how films can be about the stuff of life. And moments like that are the stuff of life, the misgivings, the misunderstandings, not this huge, ridiculous, contrived drama, just small things. It's such a, these are my favorite. This is my favorite. This is the best. This is it. Like it's so good. It's so good.
This is, I don't know. It is very much a film for you in that way of that. Ultimately, I say for you, but I also at the same time think, yes, this is very good, because it is, because if you are, naturalism is a wonderful thing when done well, because like you say, all of this is in a sad way inevitable, but that's with the same brush the film says it's okay. Like in that same scene where Joe finally says those difficult words that break his heart, you can see they break his heart, like I need you to pack your bags and leave today. And Ruben just says, okay. And like just does it and gets up and walks away. And there's no grand expression of anger. There's no argument. There's a simple, like, standing up and walking away, and a heartbroken expression from Joe. And that is completely enough for this scene to do what it needs to do. And this entire film, I was so worried about a scene where you see, like, it does happen in the beginning of the film where Ruben smashes all of his sound equipment, but it's almost an afterthought. You come in halfway through that scene and you experience it through someone else. I was so worried about getting that scene again this entire film where, your Riz Ahmed just truly loses it and smashes a bunch of stuff up. But because the main reason I'm worried about a scene like that is because I know this man now. I know who he is now, and I don't think that's him anymore. And that's what's so wonderful about naturalism is this is a person. Like I can think how they would act, I can think how they would react, and not only do I know this, but the film knows it, and it never betrays that fact, and that's beautiful. So yeah, amazing character, truly amazing character.
I guess one thing that this discussion is making me realize is that I think naturalism is very much a directorial technique that films like this employ, But I think realism is a fake idea. I don't think you can do a quote unquote realistic film. You can make a naturalistic film that is still perpetuated by ideology, right? And your decision is about what the characters do and react reflects on your worldview. And the fact that this doesn't wind up in a contrived conflict between him and the deaf community or his girlfriend speaks to the politics of this film, of like both lives that he lived were good. This isn't a painful.
Yes.
This doesn't need to hurt. Like we're not. It doesn't have the misogyny of a normal film. Like, can't trust a girlfriend after you leave. And it doesn't have the distrust of the differently abled community of that kind of. The camp leader just doesn't understand why he wants his hearing back. He wants to play the music, man. And in these are very, while it's very naturalistic, these are like deliberate choices that reflect on just how sound
clear
the thesis and the intentions of this film are for me.
I can't commend it enough. I think cohesive is the word I would use. There's not a moment of this film that betrays its narrative. I think there are people that would say that allowing him to make that mistake is betraying its own messaging and saying that that's okay. But I think that is wrong because, like we've been discussing, like life isn't a series of anything. If I were to say life is a series of mistakes, I feel like that is going against what this film is. I feel like this is a film that has no preconception of what life should be, and in doing so, accepts everything.
Darius Marder has the grace to let Riz Ahmed's character be a real person. I know a stand-in for the deaf community, not kind of this epic kind of girl boss style character who will be infallible and perfect and this exemplar for how the community is and how the community wants to be seen. And it's very telling that this is inspired by his grandmother, who was deaf, and I believe her passing and this close relationship inspired this film. And I think, even though he isn't a deaf person, that closeness speaks to how deftly he gets that messaging and those themes through without seeming preachy or condescending or reductionist.
It's insane. I genuinely can't comprehend how universally coherent and like good this film is on its messaging. It just, not only for a person to understand what they believe and like flesh that out and have these experiences, but then to take that and put it into an amalgamation of work and art and turn it into this wonderful thing that never compromises on itself, while also having a message that inherently states that compromise is okay, is not okay, not that compromise is okay, but that understanding that multiple things can be true at the same time is wonderful. And I truly cannot fathom how you do that. So amazing. I think it's time to get into recommendations. Josh, would you like to go first?
Yeah, I'm gonna give this the strongest of recommendations. I don't think there's a single beat that this film misses. Its thesis is clear and cogent, and every single part of this film reels me in and gets me. And I've never seen a film about deafness like this. And after it was done, there's a letterbox list called "You're Not the Same Person" after the film finishes, and I felt that after this finish, I had a new outlook on life and on deafness, and how we experience the world for our bodies and how we internalize that into our sense of self. And even without all these lofty intellectual kind of reasons for loving the film, on a visceral level, this is a tremendously well-made film. Riz Ahmed's performance is
Yeah.
absolutely outstanding. He's able to be angry, aggressive, irritable, while always feeling like a real ass person. I never feel like he's just being a dickhead or an asshole. I understand him every step of his journey. His progression as a person feels natural and not trite. And this was just an incredibly potent film. It's so emotionally potent. After it, I finished it in the afternoon and I felt shaken for the rest of the day, and I didn't know why, because it was incredibly optimistic. It wasn't a sad film. Its message was so optimistic, so hopeful. Optimism is the wrong word. It's hopeful. But this is just such an emotionally visceral gut punch of a film, and just tremendously beautiful. So yeah, strongest of recommends for this. I really adored it.
Yeah, I would also strongly recommend this film. I think the reason that this film can leave you shaken up is because I think it leaves you terrified at the idea of, well, at least for me, it left me terrified at the idea of being on the wrong path, and at the same time criticizing myself for thinking that way, because I think there are numerous parts of this film where Ruben is on the wrong path, and it's fine, and it's gonna be okay, because I don't know, you're just in such a safe pair of hands with the filmmaker behind this film, understanding, like I said, that multiple things can be true at once is just such a valuable outlook on reality, and looking into a different world, because it is a different world, and just shining a beautiful, illuminating, and truthful light without ever compromising on the rest of the world is truly magical. So yeah, I just, for those reasons alone, a strong recommend on Sound of Metal. Josh, what are we going to be talking about next week?
Yeah, wonderful. I have to add, just before we move on, I wasn't I wasn't shaken in the sense of like this was a cautionary tale and I'm scared that I'm gonna go deaf if I hear my headphones too loud. It's just similar to another one of my favorite films, Boyhood, kind of a film capturing so much of like life and how it feels to be a person and how it feels to be broken, and to watch someone learn to like genuinely love themselves and interact with the world in a different way, and just to move on, to watch someone conquer addiction, to watch someone become happy in a way that was earned and not trite, in 2 hours. That, I mean, I felt like I was living through his eyes, and like I just finished a long, amazing book, and it was strange when the film ended, the credits rolled, returning to my own thoughts and being like put back into my own life. It was just so emotionally intense for me. I was so in the film. So that's what I meant by shaken.
I think, like you mentioned, or like we mentioned earlier, he constructed a life here. I think he really, truly did. I don't think there's any other way of conceptualizing the things that this film has to say without interpreting almost it like an AI-esque question of what is a person, because everything I'm looking at now has the dimensions and the thoughts and the history that a person does, and I cannot tell the difference. So yeah, to see it be over is a strange thing. With that said, what are we going to be talking about next week?
Yeah, so next week we'll be discussing, we'll be continuing our Joanna Newsom retrospective and discussing her album Eve from 2006. Epic album with only 5 tracks that covered a length of 55 minutes. And yeah, I look forward to that discussion. It's a heavy album.
Truly a monolith. Okay, awesome. Thank you very much for listening. Be sure to check out our social media. Got a wonderful social media manager, Ben, over on the Instagram right now. Go say hi. And we haven't said this for a while. If you've made it to the end, email us anything you want us to talk about. Message us, leave a comment, whatever. Yeah. Always happy to hear what you want to hear.
Quite possibly the biggest achievement of this film was Riz Ahmed being shot to be more attracted than Olivia Cooke. I was very... I've always thought Olivia Cooke very beautiful women. And Riz Ahmed, this film, oh my gosh. Even when he was smashing the audio kit, when he's on that drum arm, dude, this man, he's come a long way since Four Lions. That's what I'm saying. Jesus Christ.
He's just too recognizable.
I don't know if the first posting will stay into the review.
I'm gonna make it work. Yeah, I'm putting together a team.
Fuck Jared Leto's Joker tattoos. The Riz Ahmed's tattoos in Sound of Metal.
Oh my god. Damage.
Anyway, that's all I have to say.
Okay, thank you very much for listening. Goodbye.